All right, welcome everyone to the second. Yes, that's right. We made it back for a second episode of the Ziggy and Zarley podcast, coming to you from the very quiet, very empty, but very awesome Erie Insurance Arena here in downtown Erie, Pennsylvania. I am Jim Merritt, joined by
Paul Roper.
Paul Roper, your faithful play-by-play voice of the One Erie Otters OHL team. Paul, very exciting night here in Erie at the Erie Insurance Arena. Big game for the Otters tonight as they topple the very, very strong London Knights. Go ahead and describe the game to us a little bit.
It was a fantastic game. The London Knights are a team that the Otters have played very well against this year, and tonight was certainly no exception to that. They came out very hard from the opening puck drop. Got great contributions from the newly formed unit of Luke Cairns, J.P. Lombardo, and Dane Fox, the latter of whom, not J.P. Lombardo's, Connor Brown.
There it is.
It was a line of Connor Brown, Luke Cairns, and Dane Fox. Dane Fox with 3 points against his former team, 2 goals and an assist. Very good night in net from Oscar Dansk. Game that certainly had its up and downs at both ends. The London Knights really took it to the Otters in the third period, doubling them in shots 16-8, but I thought Oscar Dansk really stood tall. He picked up his first win since December 7th, which was against the Ottawa 67s. And Connor McDavid scored one of the nicer goals we've seen from him this year. And if you've been following Connor, he scored a lot of great goals this year, but he really showed why he's going to be a top prospect come 2015. Probably the surefire #1 pick. His hands are just unbelievable. That was the best bit of stick handling I've seen from him that led to a goal. And it's almost like a big man in the NBA, soft touch around the rim. I mean, I think his backhander could have gone no more than 15 miles an hour, just bounced off the puck, the post, and he just knew where to put it. And he did it against a very good goalie in Anthony Stolars, who nearly could have stolen a point or two for the London Knights tonight after he came in relief of Jake Patterson.
Yeah, very impressive goal, walking out from the corner, beating defenseman, beating the goaltender, off the post and in. I may have to switch up my vote for favorite Connor McDavid goal of the year. That may be the new highlight reel for C. McD for me. Really impressive game for the Otters in the sense that they actually had to deal with quite a bit of adversity in the third after going up for a 3-1 lead. Get into some penalty trouble late, and they actually had a kind of bizarre but really effective move by the London Knights. They pull their goaltender on the power play with about 6 minutes left in regulation, down by 2.
Yes, well, Dale Hunter's known for thinking outside the box a little bit. He likes to get the most out of his guys. He always has a good roster to do it with. But him pulling the goalie at 6 minutes was a very risky move. I'm sure surprised a lot of fans here, but it paid off for them. They scored very quickly into that power play and got themselves back into the game again. The Otters were unable to get the puck cleared during that penalty kill and get a good shot at the empty net. The London Knights just kept forcing it through, and it was Ryan Rupert that was able to get that goal in that power play. But Dale Hunter is also a coach who's really not afraid to shake it up a bit. He pulled Jake Patterson early in the game. Didn't think that he had it. He's known for getting a quick hook on goaltenders, and it usually results in good things for him. I know a few years ago he actually changed goaltenders twice in the game. Now, it didn't work particularly in that game. That was a game in which the Otters won on Teddy Bear Toss night in London, a score of 9-3, I believe. But Dale Hunter is known for doing moves that will kind of wake up the guys, and you could tell that London played a lot better once Stolars was put in net. And he certainly had a much better night when he was out there compared to Jake Patterson, who did look shaky during those 5 shots. And pulling the goalie in that early, I thought the Otters might have been able to take advantage of it. Unfortunately for them, they did not. The London Knights were able to get back and pull within a goal. But the Otters really held their own in the final minute. They pulled the goalie again. And the Knights never really got anything going in that final minute. The Otters really clamped down. I think they knew the drill. They just didn't want to be caught in their own end again. The Otters did a good job making sure they cleared the puck and didn't really give London a good opportunity to tie the game late.
Well, also part of that is they also forced an icing with about 1 minute and 25 seconds left and actually kept the goaltender for the London Knights, in his net. They actually couldn't get him out because of the icing. And then in another kind of bizarre move, with the face-off just outside the London blue line, goaltender already out of the net. I mean, if I'm Luke Cairns there, I got to be shooting off the face-off. I got to be trying to put that one home, or at least try to fire it over to Dane Fox to try to get him the hat trick on the night. Speaking of Dane Fox and Connor Brown struggling with the empty net late in the game, Connor Brown getting 2 cracks at it, hitting the post both times, one from actually pretty in tight. Dane Fox getting an opportunity and ringing it off the goal post as well. Would have been nice to see some hats on the ice for Dane Fox, who's been very, very strong since returning from an injury for the Erie Otters this season. So it would have been nice to see Foxy get one there, but we'll take the big 2 points, climbing a little bit closer to that 8th playoff spot with Saginaw losing tonight.
Yeah, but it's still a very large hill to climb, and it's just a shame what happened to Dane Fox in the preseason. You think that if he was on this team healthy through the first half of the year, they'd be right in the thick of things, because he's a point-per-game player since return. He's up to 27 points in 27 games thanks to his 3-point night. This is a guy who, if it would have been a top 2-line player that they'd been missing from the lineup, and that's really unfortunate that he was hurt through the first half of the year and missed a majority of those games, because I think the makeup will be different for the Otters had he been playing. This was a guy who has done nothing but good things since coming from London in that Greg McKegg trade. He's someone who adds a lot of grit to the team. He can hit. He can pretty much do it all. He can win a face-off or two from time to time. He's a guy that is a positive influence on the team whenever he's out there on the ice. Now, sometimes he could take the bad penalty, but for the most part, is a very good player. And I think the fact that he was missing from the lineup really hurt the Otters through the first half of the year. Had he been there for the whole season, I think they'd be right in there in the thick of things for a playoff spot. Hopefully, he'll get an opportunity to shine next season with a professional team. If not, he'll be back for his overage year with the Otters, and I think he could be a top 3 overager in the league. Should he return to the OHL unless he earns that pro contract? Keep in mind, he did go undrafted despite being highly ranked by NHL Central Scouting in their final rankings. Despite playing the CHL NHL Top Prospects game, he did go to rookie camp with the New York Rangers, who, as far as I know, were impressed with him. But I think that another team's going to give him a look once the draft hits New Jersey in June.
Yeah, and you have to also remember, too, that Oscar Dance missing a big part of the season, not only for the World Junior Tournament, but with that injury as well, really just put a crushing blow to the playoff hopes of the Erie Otters. They're still technically alive. There's a little bit of hope in the building, but for the most part, people understand that it's probably not going to be the year that they make that magical run one more time. But a lot of good prospects going forward. Of course, Connor McDavid will still be on the team next year, and then of course, Dane Fox, it may be coming back for his overager year, could put some really good lines together. Plus, it's nice to see that the Erie Otters are putting Connor McDavid and Hayden Hodgson together. I know I told you last time on the podcast that one of the best lines in the OHL was the Lombardo, Connor McDavid, Connor Brown line. They actually have shifted that. Like Paul said, Brown dropping down to the line with Cairns and Hayden Hodgson stepping in to play wing with Connor McDavid. And because those two are both 16, both drafted together, if they can find chemistry together, they can be a magical duo for the next couple of years.
Well, yeah, I think Hayden Hodgson's a player who's been very impressive since coming into Erie. He had a 4-game point scoring streak that was snapped tonight. They're both represented by the Bobby Orr group, and I think that Hayden Hodgson is a player who could be a very good power forward when his career is said and done in the OHL. He's got a good shot. He's a good skater for someone his size. And he's a strong kid. I think he's going to be a guy who is going to help protect Connor in his career, considering they're in the same age group. But Hayden Hodgson certainly has not looked out of place on that line. He does have a good amount of speed, not nearly as much as J.P. Lombardo, definitely not as much as Connor McDavid. There might not be a faster player in the league right now than Connor McDavid. It's just amazing what burst of speed that he gets. Mike Stubb, who was a London Knights broadcaster, was telling me about that. He can't believe the acceleration that Connor gets at such a young age. And this is a guy who's been broadcasting in the league since 1996 and has seen John Tavares play for the Knights, Patrick Kane play for the Knights, Sam Gagner play for the Knights, and he was really impressed with Connor McDavid. I mean, that just goes to show you how much talent this kid has, what he's impressing observers who've been around the league 2-3 decades, and it's just simply stealing the show here in Erie. And that goal tonight certainly proved it, and also he had some other plays. And I think Connor McDavid if he had some more finish, might have 50 goals already. Reed Boucher in Sarnia has 50 goals. Hit that milestone tonight.
Yeah, and it's also great to see more celebrity guest appearances coming to see the Connor McDavid show. We did have Billy Guerin in the building here tonight. Was kind enough to stop for a picture with me while buying his son his very first Connor McDavid jersey. So Billy Guerin's children are on the Connor McDavid bandwagon, and so should you. But yeah, very impressive. 450 goals out there in Sarnia. Not unheard of at the junior level, but definitely an impressive feat.
No question. Reed Boucher, I think, is going to end up being a steal for the Devils, who are starting to draft better. They had a dead period for a long time, and that is probably the reason why they had not made a serious run at the Stanley Cup from 2003 to this year when they lost to the LA, or last year, I should say, when they lost to the LA Kings. Adam Henrique was the guy they got in the mid-round out of the Windsor Spitfires, and he's one of their top 6 players right now. He's been a very solid contributor for the New Jersey Devils. Was great as a rookie last year. Reed Boucher was the guy they drafted out of the U.S. development team, ended up going to Sarnia, and he's just deadly. He's been able to provide offense even without Alex Galchenyuk. He's got a guy named Nikolai Goldobin with him from time to time. Nikolai Goldobin is going to be another good Russian that's going to be drafted high from the Sarnia Stain. He's actually not going to be eligible till next year's draft. He could be a top 5 pick. Just impressive what Reed Boucher has been able to do. Notwithstanding, I thought it was a bad play that he had against Oscar Dansk last month by colliding into him. I don't know how that wasn't at least a goaltender interference penalty, much less a major. But Reed Boucher has got a deadly trigger, and he's going to be another good forward for the New Jersey Devils that are come out of the recent drafts that they've done so well with. And you can imagine him, especially with Ilya Kovalchuk on that team, who's another deadly trigger man, also has got a good wrist shot and can finish around the net. Devils have had a strong start this year. David Clarkson's really come onto his own, has become a top 5 power forward in the league, which when you saw him in Kitchener, probably never would have expected. It's unbelievable to see how David Clarkson has blossomed from a middling player at the OHL level, goes undrafted, goes to New Jersey. They take a chance on him and doesn't really put up much offensively. Last year puts up the points. People think it's a fluke, and all he's done is do better this year and go into the top 5 in goal scorers. He has really come onto his own thanks to his hard work ethic, and I think that the Devils, their demise was false. People thought Zach Parise was gone. They weren't going to do that well, but I thought that because of the young pipeline that they have, they were at least going to be a playoff team this year. But they've continued to impress, even with 2 40-year-old netminders, Marty Brodeur and Johan Hedberg, who's actually nearing 40. But thanks to their drafting and the fact that Peter DeBoer has been getting the most out of his guys, I thought he got a bit of a rough deal from his previous job in Tampa. Peter DeBoer's come in and has done a great job with that Devils team.
Yeah, and you have to think that with their positive drafting of these young forwards that do have such high offensive skills, that they actually could afford to lose Zach Parise long term. When you look at locking up Ilya Kovalchuk, Travis Zajac, Adam Henrique, if they can get them all locked up, well, obviously Zajac and Kovalchuk both have signed deals, but if they can get Henrique locked up for a long period of time as well, I mean, that's a deadly top 2 lines right there, regardless of who else you put with them.
Well, you look at the teams that they had that won the Stanley Cups in 95, 2000, 2003. Even if they would lose a guy like, say, Billy Guerin like they did in the mid-90s, another guy would come up. Patrick Elias, for example. You lose Bobby Holik. Scott Gomez came in. And the Devils seem to have a plan in place that has worked for 20 years. And granted, as a lifelong Ranger fan, I'm a bit jealous of it. But Lou Lamoriello knows what he's doing. He definitely still has it. I think last year's run proves that, but he's got great scouts that are around him, and he's got a system in place, and he's able to get players that make it work. They reacquired Alexei Ponikarovsky to help replace Dinas Zubers because Ponikarovsky was very successful in New Jersey last year. He was a very underrated part of that run of the Stanley Cup final. Marty Brodeur is continuing to impress in spite of his advanced age, and they just have solid players from top to bottom. They might not be the most talented players, but they're players that are the right fit for that system. You see a lot of teams that want to try and get as many stars as possible. That's not necessarily going to work. You need to have players that are going to work from top to bottom. That's why the guys like the Ryan Carson and the Steve Berniers are successful with that team, because they know the role and they do it well. The Devils aren't trying to get a bunch of superstars all at once. They try to have a very balanced team, and they've been doing very well with it to start the year.
And it's kind of amusing, maybe even ironic, coming from a Rangers fan saying that superstar teams don't work. Mr. Marion Gaborik, Rick Nash, Brad Richards, and the like, Michael Del Zotto, and some other great talented players out there for the Rangers. But it seems like that has been in the past and certainly continuing on into the present. The Rangers' business model is to get as many superstars as they can and hope that they play well enough together on their big contracts to put together enough wins to get to the Stanley Cup. I mean, obviously you see some falterings there as well with the Scott Gomez, the Chris Drury, the Wade Redden contracts that they basically had to restructure the CBA to stop the Rangers from signing players.
Yeah, I mean, I mean, it's for the Rangers. Unfortunately for them, it hasn't really worked. They haven't made a final since 1994, but when they won it, and still always talk about. I mean, you know, coming from, I guess it's something I'm used to with all the teams that I root for. The Mets still celebrate the '86 World Series. Seton Hall still celebrates 1989. Well, you know, at least the Colts have won recently in 2006, so they could harp on that for as long as they want. But for the Rangers, they're a team that has tried to do it right. I mean, they have a lot of great prospects in that Ranger system. Unfortunately, Chris Kreider was recently sent down, but they still have other guys that could step up in the future and make great contribution to this team. And a lot of the guys they have now are homegrown for the most part. The big name contracts happen few and far between because I think they realize that it's not necessarily the way it's going to work. You need to get a big guy like Rick Nash every now and then to try and make it work, but in order to make that work, you'd have to have some homegrown guys. Derek Stefan's a homegrown guy that's done very well. Ryan Callahan's a homegrown guy. He's also an OHL guy playing with the Guelph Storm, who's done very well with the Rangers. Carl Hagelin was a Rangers draft pick. On the blue line, you've got Dan Girardi, who was undrafted from the OHL and has become one of the more underrated defensemen in the league. Ryan McDonough, who they traded for in the worst trade in Canadians history. Well, when Scott Gomez went to the Canadiens, the Rangers stole Ryan McDonough, who was a top 10 blue liner in this league. Mark Stahl is a homegrown blue liner. So the Rangers have been starting to get things done the right way, and that's why they kind of came from out of nowhere to make it to the conference finals last year before they lost to the Devils. But you look at the teams that have won over the last few years. They've been doing it with homegrown players. LA, in a way, is a little bit of an exception to that, but you still look at the core that they had there. Drew Daddy was drafted. Anze Kopitar was drafted. John Quick was drafted in the late, and a steal at that in getting John Quick. So they've just done a good job. The Kings did in order to make that run. Now they did get some free agent pickups and trade pickups. They got Mike Richards coming in. They traded for Jeff Carter. So, you know, you just have to make sure that you build from the draft, and we see great examples of that. Pittsburgh's a great example of that as well. Now, some people could say, oh, they manipulated the draft to get Crosby way back when, but I don't buy that one bit. Don't buy that one bit. I'll be honest. I think that's a foolish statement to make, but you know, Pittsburgh has a lot of homegrown players as too. I mean, they got Crosby, Malkin, Fleury.
Well, there certainly is a reason.
Others. They did have Jordan Stahl. Well, go ahead.
There is certainly a reason why the guy who coined the phrase, the Pittsburgh model, is now out of his GM job, and that's Brian Burke up in Toronto, starting all that nonsense with conspiracy theories as he was sitting there at number 2 with the Anaheim Ducks. And oh, so sorry that you only ended up getting Bobby Ryan, who's a phenomenal talent on the wing and a legit pure sniper. Yeah, I mean, obviously the only place that Sidney Crosby, in my mind, should ever play is Pittsburgh. But and if they had to rig the draft to do it, as a Penguins fan, I support that notion. If they had to rig the draft to save the Penguins, then save the Penguins they should. So I will go on the record with my unabashed love. No, I can't even say it. I can't even with a straight face.
Yeah, he was almost an Anaheim Duck. You do realize that. Imagine if he was in Anaheim. I mean, they would have had Wayne Gretzky and Sidney Crosby in Southern California within years of each other, which would have been something else. But, you know, unfortunately for the Ducks, that did not happen, but they did win a Stanley Cup sooner than the Penguins did. They won it within 2 years of the lockout. So things end up working out well for both franchises. Southern California got their cup. They ended up getting another one last year, and the Pittsburgh Penguins got their cup with Sidney Crosby, and look poised to have another one. Another good win for them tonight against Winnipeg.
Yeah, and unfortunately, being at the Otters game, I did not get to watch the Penguins game in its entirety. Did catch the highlights before we started the podcast here. I mean, great effort from Craig Adams on the first goal. About 3 minutes, 4 minutes into the game. Joe Vitale makes a nice play down the wing. Craig Adams gets not one, not two, but 3 cracks at the rebound and finally puts it home to score his first goal of the year. And then we get nothing really going on in the second, highlight-wise anyway. NHL.com didn't believe anything happened in the second. But in the third, Winnipeg gets into some penalty trouble, taking 2 penalties, 25 seconds apart. And that Penguins power play, which had sputtered at points early in the season, is beginning to just look completely lethal. Sidney Crosby, 2 Evgeny Malkin, 2 James Neal, shoots low through the 5-hole on Pavlik to put the Penguins up 2-0 on the 5-on-3. With about 2 minutes and change left in the game, the Winnipeg Jets do pull their goaltender. Brian Little puts a shot on net. Andrew Ladd corrals the rebound and puts that in behind Fleury for the lone goal of the game for Winnipeg. And magically enough, the casual Craig Adams going into Winnipeg and potting home the empty netter as well for his second goal of the year and sealing the win for the Penguins 3-1.
Yeah, that's a tough building to play in. Winnipeg might have the best home ice advantage in terms of how loud the building can be. They waited so long to get an NHL franchise back. They support that rink every night, and they are loud when they are doing it. Unfortunately for the Jets, the roster leaves a little bit to be desired. I still don't really think that Andre Pavlik has the goods to be a #1 goaltender. Might be a bit of a bold statement to make, but I think they're so much better out there. I wouldn't put him in the top 20 goaltenders in the league. I think they have to kind of improve that roster, but they're a little bit hurt by the fact that they are a small market team. They don't have as much money as a Pittsburgh or New York or Detroit. They have to make do with what they have, and they do have some solid young players. Vander Kane is solid. Zach Bogosian, when he's healthy, is solid, but that's the rub, is that he gets hurt quite a bit. Andrew Ladd, I think, has really broken out and done well for him, and Brian Little hasn't done too bad over the past couple of weeks or so. But it's just a tough building to play in now. If Winnipeg could start winning on the road, then they might have something. But anytime you get 2 points in Winnipeg is certainly an achievement. And the Pittsburgh Penguins able to do a good job today and get some secondary scoring from Craig Adams to pull out the win.
Well, I think the one thing that you do forget about being the biggest obstacle that the Winnipeg Jets have to overcome is that they were previously the Atlanta Thrashers. I mean, that team, drafting-wise, trading-wise, just made terrible decisions throughout the legacy of their time in Atlanta. I mean, that Marian Hossa trade to Pittsburgh, what went back the other way? Colby Armstrong, bust. Angelo Esposito, injured, bust. First-round pick, never turned into anybody. I mean, they got fleeced in that Hossa trade, and they even gave up Dupuis, who became even a bigger part of the Penguins really than Hossa by staying on and being a #1 line winger for Sid. Some people do debate whether he should be up there or not, but he does have chemistry. He plays well with Crosby, so you can't knock that part of the trade. I mean, this is a franchise that traded Braden Coburn for the barely animated corpse of Alexei Zhitnik. I mean, it was just one of the worst trades I've ever seen, and you just have to think, what were they doing for all of this time?
Don Waddell had the job about 7 years too long. He was the only GM in the history of the Thrashers, which, hey, they only had 0 playoff wins. 0 playoff wins throughout their time. And you didn't even mention the Kovalchuk trade. They got Nicholas Bergfors, Johnny Oduya. I don't think Bergfors even plays in the league anymore. Oduya is now in Chicago and didn't even spend that much time in Atlanta. I mean, that's just series upon series of bad decisions. I can't even remember how Danny Heatley left that organization either. It's just, with the talent that they did have, it's just unbelievable what little they got in return. And unfortunately, that is caught up with the Winnipeg Jets. But they're starting to build things right. I thought Olli Jokinen was a good signing before the year. Although not as good as the Brad Boyce signing in New York. You know, I mean, he's starting to find his groove with the Islanders. They got him for cheap. We'll talk about the Islanders a little bit later. But with Winnipeg, yeah, they were a bit hamstrung by what had occurred in the previous regime in Atlanta. It was just a poorly run team. And but, you know, you could just throw a few kids in the rink and put NHL jersey on, and they're going to show up in Winnipeg. So the honeymoon phase is going to last for quite a while there. But if it continues for the next 2 or 3 years, it's going to get old quick. So hopefully they'll start turning things around there. They look good on some nights, and other nights, you know, it's just, you know, the lack of talent is too much for them to overcome. But hopefully they'll turn things around, because that's a team I like watching, the Winnipeg Jets.
Well, especially when they're at home. I mean, that fan base up there makes any game entertaining, whether they're chanting Crosby's better at Ovechkin or Jordan's better at Eric Stahl, although I don't imagine they'll be doing that too much with both Stahls reunited in Carolina. But I think the one thing you did forget to mention with the Winnipeg Jets is the talent they have also on the back end in the form of Toby Enstrom and Dustin Byfuglien as well. Big shots. Unfortunately, Toby Enstrom getting hurt tonight. Leaving the game, I believe, at the end of the first period. And that's a big loss for them. I mean, he's leading the team in points with 13, 11 assists, 2 goals. Very small player, ridiculously long stick for some unknown reason. And, I mean, he's very, very just scrappy, and he finds ways to get pucks to the net, gets rebounds, people tip him in. I mean, this guy is a big, big loss for them. And if he's not back anytime soon, they're definitely going to be in trouble.
Yeah, and it's a big loss for my fantasy team as well with Toby Enstrom. They have a lot of good blue liners with some offensive potential between Toby Enstrom, Dustin Byfuglien, Zach Bogosian, and Ron Hazy has some offensive tendencies from time to time. But that's kind of the issue with the Jets, is that they don't really have any good stay-at-home D, and you need that. We talked about that previously with Rob Scuderi. You need a few Rob Scuderis on your team. You need a guy that's going to stay in the back end and clear out the traffic in front. The Jets don't have a guy like that. Their defense is too offensive-minded. For as good as Toby Enstrom can be and put up from points in the blue line, he is a liability defensively. And they have to make sure that they have someone that's going to help support him. Dustin Byfuglien's another guy that likes to jump into the play, and usually he's paired with Toby Enstrom. So those are two guys that are going to jump in more or not, and you're going to get caught in odd man rushes. And you know, I feel like with a guy like Pavelec in net, you can't trust that. You need to have a goalie that's going to, I think, is going to bail you out from time to time. I don't think Pavelec is that guy right now. I think the Jets have to consider, at least next year, going after somebody who I think would be an upgrade in net. Al Montoya is their backup, and now he's hurt. I don't even know. Oh, it's Eddie Pasquale, who used to play in the OHL. Lots of OHL references here tonight. It's just great to see all of them jumping into our podcast here and seeing all those guys jump into the NHL. But I think the big problem that the Jets do have is, while they've got some great guys that could put up points from the blue line, that's the issue, is that they put up points from the blue line. There's not enough guys that could put pucks in the net that play up front. It's almost as if their roles are reversed. You want your defense to keep pucks out, and you want your offense to put pucks in. And for the Jets, it's completely the opposite on both ends.
Yeah, I mean, their forwards are defensive mostly in nature. I want to say Nick Bergfors may be still walking around as a reanimated Thrasher for the Winnipeg Jets, because he is a notorious Penguins killer when he was with New Jersey. And so I do believe I did see him floating around in Winnipeg. Obviously didn't catch all of the game tonight, but I'll definitely go back when I get home and look for Mr. Bergfors there. But, yeah, honestly, I'm more surprised that they don't have more, like, 2-on-0 breakaways the other way, because Byfuglien and Toby Enstrom have both pinched. I mean, they're just, the lack of defensive responsibility back there is mind-boggling, and it's just not going to work out in the long term. They desperately need a stay-at-home defenseman. And, yeah, I mean, I do believe they did just sign Pavelec to a long-term deal there. So, I mean, if that's true, and, you know, feel free, correct us on Twitter, at thekid8711, at Paul_Roper. Please feel free to tell me I'm wrong. I probably am. But I think that was one of those deals, along with Kerry Lettinen in Dallas, that they snuck in right before the CBA expired, and I think they overpaid for him. Mm-hmm. Not only did they keep him, but they overpaid for him. And I agree, he's just not top-quality goaltending in this league. And, I mean, it's really easy to score on a goaltender that passes out sometimes before the play even starts.
Oh, man, that's a bit of a low blow there, but you're right. And looked up Nick Bergfors. He is playing in the KHL right now. Cherapovets, which, you know, it's and that just goes to show you the bad decisions made by Don Waddell for the Atlanta Thrashers. Just about the only good decision that he made was hiring Dan Kamal as the radio guy, because he was one of the best radio guys in the league. And now he's back in the States doing stuff for Columbus. You know, he was so good that the Winnipeg Jets hired him to do the pre- and post-game stuff for the Jets broadcast and be the reporter. So that was the only good decision that they made, was having Dan Kamal as a radio guy, because he was one of the best in the league. It's a shame he's not doing radio games regularly anymore because of the move to Winnipeg. I think that was the worst thing about that move, is that the fact that he wasn't calling games anymore as a play-by-play homer. I gotta show love to the play-by-play guys there. But anyway, that is just mind-boggling that they did extend the contract to Pavlik, especially considering who could have been out there. I mean, you look at Thomas Rice, who could be a guy that could be on the market next year. He didn't have the greatest of games earlier in the week with San Jose, but I think would have been an upgrade over Pavlik in that, or at least try to be an upgrade over Pavlik in that. And they could have used a guy like Lindbach, who's now in Tampa Bay, and I think has done pretty well for himself after being the backup in Nashville.
Yeah, and to jump on the Tampa Bay story there, they are playing well, doing a lot of good stuff down there in Tampa Bay. Of course, Steven Stamkos, an unbelievable talent. We all know that. Marty St. Louis as well, having a really great start to the season. And then you look at their top six. I mean, Ryan Malone, Vincent LeCavalier. These are top-end players that are playing together down there in Tampa. And their power play looks good. The goaltending has held up so far. That is pretty much the biggest question mark, along with defense. I'm not a giant Matt Carl fan. I think Matt Carl should actually have to give 80% of his contract to Chris Pronger, because that is the only reason he was signed to it, because Chris Pronger made him look good in Philadelphia. So Matt Carl, I haven't watched a ton of Tampa Bay games, but if I was looking at a liability spot for Tampa Bay in the future, it may be on the back end or in that net.
Yeah, and you want to talk about a guy who's not been a liability. It's Sammy Salo, who has become an ageless wonder. I mean, this is a guy who has seemingly come out of nowhere and has found his mojo again. We know he has that hard shot, but he's dishing it out this year from the blue line. And he was kind of an underrated figure on this team. And Sammy Salo's done a terrific job there, and they're getting contributions from everywhere. Corey Conacher did well earlier in the season. He slowed down quite considerably recently, but
much to the chagrin of your fantasy team.
Yeah, he's another fantasy guy. So is Matt Carl, sadly. Sounds like I need to reevaluate my fantasy team. But we know you get from Marty St. Louis, Vinny LeCavalier. When Ryan Malone's healthy, he's a solid player for him. But they're getting contributions from Teddy Purcell. Tom Pyatt's done very well in a third, fourth line role. Just guys are helping out from everywhere, and this is a team that has done very well for itself, all things considered. You know, Steven Stamkos is going to help, I guess in this case, pot home 30 goals this season in this shortened year. So there are questions on the blue line. Victor Hedman is still continuing to develop after being a top pick a few years back for the Tampa Bay Lightning. Anders Lindbach still really getting his feet wet. Keep in mind, he didn't play all that much in Nashville behind Pekka Rinne, but the Lightning, no pun intended, hoping to catch lightning in a bottle with Anders Lindbach. He's backed up by Matthew Garon. But we'll have to see what happens with that team. They actually called out one of my favorite OHL players, in Richard Panik, a few days ago, a former member of the Guelph Storm, Windsor Spitfires, and Belleville Bulls. So hopefully he'll do well with them and be another guy that can come out from the woodwork and pot home a few goals here and there. Richard Panik, the native of Slovakia, who made his NHL debut earlier in the week. But I hope that his fellow Slovak, Jaroslav Janas, will eventually play a game in a Lightning uniform, because he's doing very well in the KHL this year with Bratislava.
Yeah, it would be great to see him get a chance with the Tampa Bay Lightning, especially because their goaltending situation is a little bit in flux. I mean, they did bring in Lindback, who looks to be their number one for the near future, but Matthew Garon's not getting any younger, and to have a competent backup like a Jaroslav Janas, who has put up some unbelievable performances, especially on the international stage, just stonewalling Team USA in an international game. Much to my chagrin, even though I am a big Jaroslav Janas fan. But I would also like to talk a little bit about where Anders Lindback came from, Nashville. Didn't get into him too much on the last podcast, so I would like to give him a little love here, especially a shout out to my friend Kyle down in Nashville, who is very, very kind to support the podcast. But no, with the Predators, it's interesting what happens when Ryan Suter leaves and Shea Weber looks a little lost without his buddy.
Yes, he does, and it's just you know what it is that he was able to go out and jump into play a little bit with Ryan Suter there. Now he can't do it as much anymore. He's got to go back more defensively, and as a result, he only has 2 points this season. And it's been a real disappointment as far as his offense is concerned. But Still some very nice options on the blue line. Ryan Ellis, who was a guy I never thought was going to make a big career in the NHL because I thought his game wouldn't translate well, has done very well for Nashville. He's made me a believer, and he's done a great job there after coming from the Windsor Spitfires and setting all sorts of records from the blue line there and winning a couple of Memorial Cups in the process. And then up front, they've got a bunch of guys that can put the puck in the net every now and then. David Legwand is not going to put up too much offense from you, but he's very consistent every game. He's Mr. Predator. He's been there pretty much every game from day one for the franchise. So too is Barry Trotz, who you look at coaches around the league. They lose their jobs, here and now. Lots of turnover in the NHL, but Barry Trotz has managed to stay through it all, and that's a guy who deserves to be there. He gets the most out of his team no matter what. His teams were competitive even when they weren't making the playoffs, and now that he has a team to compete with, I think that he does a great job behind the bench. And when you have a goalie like Pekka Rinne, you're going to win games every night. Pekka Rinne, I think, has done a sensational job in that, even though he struggled in the KHL earlier this year. I want to say almost got out of the league as a result because of how poorly he performed. But he goes back in the NHL, and it's just like last year, him continuing to do well between the pipes. And the Predators are a team that could try and make some headway in the Central Division, but very tough because the Blackhawks just can't seem to lose at the end of 60 minutes. They always find a way to earn a point there. They're going to be the team to beat right now in that Central Division unless the Predators have any say about it.
Yeah, well, to save some face for Pekka Rinne, it is difficult for goaltenders, and that's why you don't see as many goaltenders jumping over to the KHL or the European leagues with that larger ice surface. You actually lose your positioning because of the ice surface being so much wider. Your angles are a little bit off, and if you don't adjust to that, then you are going to let up some goals. And if you can't counterbalance that or adjust to it quickly, you're going to get run out of the league, which Pekka Rinne was probably very close to having that happen to him. And I was a little worried about him at the beginning of the season because if he did start to adjust to that larger ice surface, would his angles be off coming back to a regulation-style rink? So to see him succeed early in the year after after some strange outings out there in Mother Russia, he yeah, definitely didn't play very well there, but glad to see him back and doing well. But on the Chicago topic, I mean, this is a team that just doesn't quit. They just refuse to lose, and I am just blown away. This was not a year that I had Chicago pegged to be the #1 team in the West or even, winning the Central Division. I thought St. Louis might have actually had that spot all the way wrapped up. So to see what they're doing in Chicago is really impressive. I believe they were up 3-1 on San Jose the last time we checked in with that game tonight. And a big turnaround out there in San Jose. San Jose, who was very, very hot at the beginning of the season. We talked about it on the last podcast. Off to a rocky road trip, losing, I believe, 4 of their last 5 games. Getting some points for overtime and shootout losses, getting blanked by Phoenix in a shootout by Mike Smith. But, I mean, they are in a losing streak, and this is a season, with this shortened season, a losing streak can be a downward spiral, and you can, no matter what headway you gained, play yourself right out of a playoff spot.
Well, that's exactly it. You look with the New York Islanders as an example, that they were actually on top of the Atlantic Division for a brief time, and then they went to a 6-game losing streak before finally winning their previous game against the New York Rangers in a shootout. Blackhawks did get the victory over the Sharks 4-1 tonight. Unfortunately, we're dating ourselves a little bit here, but the Blackhawks can't seem to lose, even without Corey Crawford, as Ray Emery got the start, and will probably get the next few starts as a result. Henrik Karlsson has been called up to back him up, the former Calgary Flame, and speaking of them, they're losing right now to the Blues in that contest, as the Blues need to earn some wins here and there because they've been up and down to start the year. And the Sharks, after that strong start, I mean, we talked about them the night after it was the first Sharks Blackhawks game, also at United Center, if I recall correctly. No, excuse me, that game was in San Jose. It was in San Jose the night before, and the rematch was tonight at United Center, and the Blackhawks ended up winning that game, if I'm not mistaken, and they won here tonight in emphatic fashion with their backup goaltender in Ray Emery. So there's no quitting the Blackhawks. As I mentioned in the last podcast, there's another team that has just done well with draft and getting the right pieces in there. They have Jonathan Toews, Patrick Kane. Brandon Saad is starting to turn it on a little bit lately, starting to show flashes of why Chicago picked him up in the second round, thought he was a steal because I always thought Brandon Saad was a first-round player. And I couldn't believe Chicago got him as late as they did. Duncan Keith and Brent Seabrook are on the blue line. Corey Crawford, until he got hurt, was really holding his own in net this year after his disappointing performance in the playoffs last year. There are more players that I have yet to name there on that Blackhawks team. But they're a team that is just impressive in every facet of the game. And as you said, they don't quit. And that's what you need. You need to have a team that's not going to quit on any given night and always give 100%. And they've just done a remarkable job in kind of brushing off the doubters, doing their own thing. The only team in the NHL without a regulation loss in a tough division between themselves, St. Louis, Nashville, and Detroit. And if you had asked me before the season, I would have thought that Chicago at best would have been a third-place team in the Central Division, but they're coming out of the gates, and it looks like there's no stopping them.
Well, let's not forget about our friends, the Columbus Blue Jackets. They're out there in the Central. Yeah, they're not setting the world on fire, but they actually have been putting together in some nice games lately, including a big 6-2 victory over the aforementioned Sharks earlier this week. And it is good to see the Blue Jackets starting to go in the right direction. John Davidson being a great hire there. Jarmo Kukalainen also a fantastic pick for GM. One of the best scouts, best draft people out of the St. Louis organization that I've personally ever seen. So great pickup there. Going to be a lot of talent coming into the Columbus Blue Jackets locker room through the draft in the next few years. But finally starting to put it together in Columbus, we hope. Wisniewski, a little injury scare there. Glad to see him back. Jack Johnson logging some incredible minutes with Wisniewski out. I mean, he played 35, 36 minutes a couple of nights there. So just a tremendous show of endurance by him. So we all have our fingers crossed. I believe it's a team that, because the area surrounding the arena is just so nice. They have one of the best arena districts in the entire National Hockey League. And you really do hope that that team can really catch on and go somewhere, because that team was very exciting. That building was exciting when they were in the playoffs against Detroit, and you could feel the hope and the excitement there. And all they need is a team that can win, and they're going to draw big crowds, and they're going to have a great time there in that Columbus market. Oh,
absolutely. They were the only game in town as far as the state of Ohio is concerned with an NHL hockey team, and they've shown to support that team. It's just that they're tired of the losing, and the case was proven with Scott Housen being let go. And to Housen's credit, he did lead the team to their only playoff appearance. They just didn't get any playoff wins as a result. And again, another Atlanta Thrashers situation. But they have some guys there that they could build around. Jack Johnson's one of those guys. James Wisniewski's not done a bad job. And I really don't think Bob Rofsky's that bad of an option in net. I think that he could take the lead and at least hold the fort until one of Jonas Korpisalo or Erie's own Oscar Dansk is ready. So they're certainly set in net, I think, for the future with any of those guys. And as far as the rest of the team goes, they've got a very good player that's going to come up in the pipeline in Boone Jenner, who plays for the Oshawa Generals. It's going to be a tough player to play against when he gets into the NHL.
Got a nasty edge to him.
Absolutely, which is good to have. You need to have players that have a nasty edge. And Boone Jenner is going to be the guy that is going to give the Blue Jackets some much-needed grit.
And one of my favorite quotes, not specifically about Boone Jenner, but I believe it was Peter DeBoer that said, I'd much rather attempt to tame a tiger than to paint stripes on a kitty cat. So anytime you see a guy that has that nasty edge, and I believe that was perhaps Steve Downey that he was referring to with that comment, but again, tweet me if I'm wrong. No, I mean, you like to see that nasty edge. You like a guy that you don't want him out there running people. You don't want him hurting people, but you do want to make sure that he has that physical edge to his game that you know he's going to bring it every night, not just with hands, not just with skill, not just with speed, but also the ability to put on a nice heavy forecheck, get physical along the boards, and win some puck battles. So Boone Jenner will be exciting to see, and a very potentially OHL heavy team there in the Columbus area. So always like to see our OHL stars moving on and doing well in the NHL.
Absolutely. Well, as I mentioned, Oscar Dansk is a Columbus prospect. Another player we saw tonight was a Columbus prospect is Josh Anderson from the London Knights. And of course, Boone Jenner. They also had, at one point, Brandon Archibald, but he's no longer a Columbus Blue Jackets prospect. You run down to some of the players that are on they're in the Blue Jackets organization. Now I'm trying to think right now. I'm racking my brain. Who else from the Blue Jackets was from the OA? Well, Steve Mason was. He played for the London Knights.
Very true.
Rick Nash was, when he was on the Blue Jackets, of course, playing also with the London Knights. Seems like it's a recurring theme. London Knights becoming Columbus Blue Jackets.
Well, when you have a very strong program like the London Knights, not surprising that you're going to see a lot of players drafted, especially in high positions, which unfortunately the Columbus Blue Jackets always seem to have. Maybe to get off topic a little bit, maybe the most interesting OHL player, former Erie Otter, Ryan O'Reilly. A story that is probably not picking up as much steam as it should be. Sitting out in Colorado, refusing to sign the contract that has been offered by the Colorado Avalanche, believes he is worth more than the proposed $3.5 million that the Avalanche have offered, wants something more in the $5 million range. And this is a huge blow to Colorado. Steve Downey getting hurt, being out for a long time, obviously not helping. Gabriel Landeskog actually took to the ice and skated today, so that was very positive news to hear for the Colorado Avalanche. But their top line last year, and Ryan O'Reilly, wasn't Matt Duchene, it wasn't Gabby Landeskog, it was Ryan O'Reilly who was their top point-scoring forward and player, for that matter, on the team for the Colorado Avalanche last year. So I really believe that Ryan O'Reilly, the reason he's so upset with the $3.5 million contract offer is you go out, you see Colorado sign a guy like P.A. Parento for 4 years, $4 million per. You see Colorado go out and sign David Jones, 4 years, $4 million per. You see them go out and sign Matt Duchene, $3.5–4 million a year. I'm not, I don't know his cap number or his hit right off the top of my head, but you're looking at a player that a lot of people were saying Ryan O'Reilly should be the captain of this team. Yep. He's been a captain everywhere he's played, natural-born leader, one of their best face-off guys, great two-way forward. I just don't think that they're going to get this contract situation done. I think they're going to have to trade him, but where and what do you get?
Well, I think he has played his last game as a member of the Colorado Avalanche, and you hit it right there. I think he is worth than what they are giving him. Some people say that he's being a bit of a sourpuss, but I don't think so. And David Jones is getting $4 million. I'd be upset too. I think Ryan O'Reilly is a much better player than that. And I would think he's going to go to an Eastern Conference team. There's certainly a bunch of good landing spots. I think the Avalanche are only considering trading him to an Eastern Conference team. The Islanders need a little bit of center help, but are they going to be willing to part with anybody? I don't think they will. Apparently, it's been rumored that the Islanders might be floating Michael Grabner to go the other way to the Colorado Avalanche, but I'm not certain if that could be taken to stock. I know Toronto's interested in him. And you know Toronto always likes to make a splash, and that's a player who's going to be instantly popular in Toronto. And they've been looking for somebody to help fill that center void since Matt Sundin left. It's a long time ago. They need to have some good centermen there. Ryan O'Reilly, I don't think is going to be a first-line center, but he's going to be a very solid second-line center. He's going to be a guy that's going to be great on face-offs, great penalty killer. He's a good two-way player. He's a great playmaker. I think that he is going to find to be a high-value player wherever he goes, and I don't know why Colorado doesn't see that. There's a lot of fans in Colorado that are upset with that, because what O'Reilly has that other players don't is work ethic. He's always been known to be the last player on the ice by 30 minutes or so, just doing his own drills, doing his own things, 30 minutes after practice is over. He's always working hard to make sure that he can be the best at his craft. You wish that other players would have his work ethic, and unfortunately, the Avalanche have decided that they're going to lowball and give him a $3.5 million offer when they give out $4 million contracts like it's candy. Now, I won't say that he's better than Duchene. I do think Duchene's the better player. He's certainly worth a $4 million salary. But when you give it to guys like P.A. Parento, who, granted, has done very well in the NHL after having a terrific AHL career, but I wouldn't call him a better player than Ryan O'Reilly. Definitely not David Jones. And what did David Jones do to earn $4 million a year? I mean, I thought that was the worst contract since Jeff Finger to the Leafs.
Well, David Jones, to his credit, did have a couple of 20-goal seasons. I believe Ryan O'Reilly has only maxed out at 18 and 19 in his 2 seasons with the Colorado Avalanche. So, I mean, the numbers, I mean, David Jones with a 27-goal year, I'm not putting much more stock in those 8 goals when you miss out on, face-offs and penalty killing and leadership. I mean, this is a guy, and I know these are all intangibles. There's not dollar values that you can put on intangibles, but I just don't understand where you're coming from when you're saying that Ryan O'Reilly is not worth as much as a P.A. Parento. Or, I mean, in P.A. Parento, in that sense, how many of his points that he put up are directly influenced by Matty Molson and John Tavares, who were his line mates in the Island. So, I mean, it's a bad situation. I don't know why there's this big stigma and on offer sheets. Maybe we should get into that. Why the offer sheet is a dead art in the NHL. But you got to think, if somebody floated a $5 million offer sheet to Ryan O'Reilly right now, Colorado's not matching. They're going to let you have him.
Yep, and they'll gladly take that first-round pick. So I think that there should be a team that goes after that, because who knows what Colorado is trying to get. I think Colorado is trying to get a ransom for Ryan O'Reilly. I've been hearing a hot, top prospect and a player, or a first-round pick and a player. But I don't think there's going to be a team that's going to be willing to do that. If there's a team that thinks that they're going to be in a better position by going for the offer sheet and giving up the first-round pick, they might as well do it. Hey, New Jersey might as well do it. They're going to lose that pick anyway. I don't know if they're able to use an offer sheet or not. But, you know, there's a few teams that should at least, I think, consider the possibility of giving up a first-round pick. I believe that would be the compensation due to the cost of the contract. I believe it's a first-round pick.
I believe it's also a third as well. So you'd be giving up a first and a third for a $5 million player.
You wouldn't be giving up a player. That's the thing. Are you willing to part with the future in order to try and win now? And I think you would for a player like Ryan O'Reilly. There's going to be a team that's just this close, that's one player away, that would be willing to part with a couple of picks and sign a player that could be a big part of their franchise for years to come. He's only 22. He's only 21 years old, born 91. He's only 21 years old. So he's still got some great years ahead of him. He's going to be he's going to be a future Selke winner. I've been saying that for a long time. So I think a team should definitely take a chance on him, because I think what the Avalanche are looking to get from him is going to be far less than what you'd be parting with if you were to sign with far more than what you'd be parting with if you sign him to an offer sheet.
Well, that's the thing. That's the reason why. I guess because I'm a believer in the draft being such a crapshoot. Yes, a first-round pick is a tough thing to give away, but you look at Ryan O'Reilly, where he was drafted, the second overall pick in the second round. He's basically a late first-round pick. I mean, if you want to look at it that way. So you're giving up a first-round pick not for a prospect, for an established second-line center with great upside. I mean, he's not even in his prime yet, people. He's 21 years old. And the sky's the limit for this kid. I mean, he's never going to be a 50-goal scorer, but he could pot 30. He could be a good playmaker. He can be your number one PK unit. He can be your, best two-way player. So I don't see where the first and the third. Yeah, you can get some great players in the third round. Penguins drafted Chris Letang in the third round. But in the same token, you can get some terrible players in the third round that'll never, ever see the ice in the NHL. So I'm not a big fan of people not using the offer sheet. When PK Subban was unsigned, when Jamie Benn was unsigned earlier this season, I was telling people, somebody should offer sheet these guys. You're getting a great player for unknown picks. You never know. That number one or that first round pick, you could win the cup. Could be number 30. That first-round pick could be Hugh Jessamine. Be the only player in the 2003 draft to never see the ice in the NHL. The draft is such a crapshoot. Why wouldn't you sacrifice draft picks for a stellar player you already know what you're going to get?
Yep, and I think that it's something that you should definitely consider. You made a good point about Jessamine, who I actually believe did skate his shit to the NHL last year, but was the last player to do so. And as a Rangers fan, I was upset with that pick from the start, because I believe that was the year they could have picked Zach Parise, and that was the player I wanted. No, they had to get Hugh Jessamine, who was a huge bust. And it's just, you never know what's going to happen with the draft. I mean, in essence, even though that they have been able to, even though the draft has become a process where you see less and less busts, it's still in effect a crapshoot. I mean, what's not to say that a guy like Derek Pouliot could be a bust. A guy who was drafted in the top 10 by the Pittsburgh Penguins, who they trade up for. I mean, you never know what you're going to get. It's not a perfect, exact science. I mean, you're basically giving up a player that technically doesn't exist because you haven't drafted him yet. Why not give up the pick? Let another team take a chance with it, because you know you're going to get a good player anyway when you sign to the offer sheet and the other team doesn't match.
Well, I mean, if you want to go down that rabbit hole, if you want to depress yourself, we can look at the 2003 draft and all the players, fantastic players that came out of that draft after Hugh Jessamine. And I don't know if you want to do that, though, Paul, because that is a depressing journey. I've seen what that does to Rangers fans. I've personally inflicted that upon Rangers fans as the terrible person that I am. But no, when you're talking about the draft, and especially with the Penguins jumping up for Derek Pouliot. Honestly, it makes no sense. I had absolutely no idea where they were going with that pick. I know he and Joe Morrow play together on the Portland Winterhawks, maybe looking at future chemistry down the line as a potential number 1 or number 2 D pair with those two players. But at the same token, here's a team in the Pittsburgh Penguins that routinely drafts defensemen with their first 3 rounds. And they're taking for their first forward a guy like Mattia Marcantuoni, who I think is a steal. They got him for Columbus's pick, the Mark Letestu pick, in the 4th round this year. Great speed, one of the fastest players I've personally ever seen play down. I went to see him at the Penguins Rookies and Prospects Development Camp down there, and he was just tearing up the ice how fast he was. He was insane. But, when you're waiting to the 4th, 5th, 6th round to draft forwards, you're going to get what you're going to get.
Yep.
I mean, there's only so many Pavel Datsyuk and Henrik Zetterbergs out there in round 6 and 7. Most of the time, if you want a great forward in a draft, you have to use an early pick. And in the Penguins' case this year, Philip Forsberg is sitting there at 8. And I was actually going to start a "We Want Forsberg" chant in the building, but I didn't because I thought it was redundant. I thought he was the pick. And to see them go off the board for a guy that some people had pegged as a 25th, 28th, second-round player, to take him at 8 just absolutely astonished me. Luckily, they did recoup some of that draft by taking Olli Maatta, who we did see here in Erie tonight for the London Knights. Thank God they got him late at 22.
I thought he was a good pick.
That's a great pick at 22.
And they could have had Grigorenko with that pick, too, at number 8, and he went to the Sabres. He's in the NHL right now.
Yep. And where's Derek Pouliot? Taking selfies on Instagram and playing for the Portland Winterhawks. Yes, I do, unfortunately, follow Derek Pouliot on Instagram. Shout out, Derek, if you're listening.
Well, I tell you, it's always just fun to see all the drafts over the past few years. That was the first draft I ever got to attend. I'm sure your first draft as well. It's just amazing to see everything that unfolded there. The one thing that's going to stick out is the fans booing Scott Laughton when he was drafted by the Flyers. But you know what? You get to play games in the NHL this year. That's more than we'll ever get. It's more than most of those fans will ever get. He had the last laugh because he got to make some NHL money as an 18-year-old.
Yeah, good for him. I don't like seeing a prospect booed. I know they're not booing the kid. They're booing the team that drafted him. But at the same token, those boos were loud.
They were.
It wasn't a smattering of boos. It was not a few fans that were booing. I would say 80% of that building was booing that poor kid. And that was a little bit much for me. You want to say, well, the Flyers are on the clock. Boo the house down. Just boo them out the building. That's fine. But they announce a kid, 17, 18, 19-year-old kid. Give him a break. He's never even played a shift for the Flyers. You don't know if he ever will. Some of these players, they get drafted, they don't even make it to the team that drafts them. They get traded for other players or prospects. So to boo an 18-year-old kid just because of the jersey he was about to put on was a little bit ridiculous. But at the time, it's just great to see that many people there caring about the draft when essentially it's 30 guys picking names out of a hat.
Yeah, and I tell you, I don't know what it's going to be like in 2 years when the draft is in Philadelphia. Or it's next year, I should say, 2014.
Yeah.
This year it'll be in New Jersey, so they're gonna have a couple targets. They're gonna boo the Rangers, the Flyers, the Penguins, and when it gets to Philly, they could be ruthless. They might be booing everybody that comes up. I don't know whose idea it was to put the NHL draft in Philly, but that could be a disaster waiting to happen. We're talking about the city that booed Santa Claus. Now, granted, that is taken out of context, but if Philly fans are not going to forget what happened to Scott Laughton last year in Pittsburgh. They're not going to forget it in 2014. And I'm sure they've got something up their sleeve if the Penguins pick in the first round. But who knows? Maybe the Penguins will trade that pick to avoid that from happening. Who knows? Maybe the pick will be given up if they sign somebody to an offer sheet. You never know. We'll see what happens.
Yeah, if I'm Ray Shero, I'm calling up teams and going, oh, you got a prospect? You want a number 1 pick in 2014? I don't want to get on that podium in Philly. There better be metal detectors at those doors because Philadelphia fans, they'll throw batteries. They'll do pretty much anything out there in that barn. Yeah, I don't think we're going to have a whole lot of Flyer fans that are going to be listening to the podcast, but that's okay because we don't like them anyway. But no, if you are a Flyers fan, I apologize. I'm sure you're a lovely person.
Your cheesesteaks are awesome.
Your cheesesteaks are phenomenal. I just wish I didn't have to go to Philadelphia to get them.
You can get a good one in South Jersey. There were some good cheesesteak places in Trenton when I was working there.
To Jersey we go.
Yeah, you got to go to Jersey. I mean, there's still there you can get some good cheesesteaks anywhere in the Philadelphia, South Jersey area.
Duly noted. Maybe for the draft in 2013, if I can get off of work, maybe I'll sneak my way out there, try to get tickets.
Oh, you know what? If you go to the one in Newark, we got to go to Hobby's Deli.
Going to Hobby's Deli.
Best corned beef ever if you're a corned beef fan.
I'm down.
And it's like a few blocks away from Prudential Center. We'll take you to Hobby's, and we gotta shout them out there. Whenever we had Hobby's Deli as media food for the Newark Bears, I loved it. I mean, their sandwiches were just awesome. The owner loved working with the Bears and actually did a great thing for the soldiers in Iraq and Afghanistan. They did a thing called Operation Salami Drop, where they actually delivered their deli meats, their salami, their corned beef, their pastrami. They managed to find a way to keep it fresh and give it to the soldiers in Afghanistan. They did a great job with that for several years. But their sandwiches are just amazing, notwithstanding what they've done in the community. But Hobby's Deli, if you've never been, if you're from the New York City area, check them out. People swear by New York delis. I certainly do. But Hobby's Deli is worth the visit if you're in Newark. If you're going to a Devils game anytime soon, make the stop at Hobby's. Hobby's. I almost sounded like I was from Boston. Hobby's. But Hobby's Deli is the place for the best corned beef, I believe, outside New York City. And it is phenomenal. So make sure, because it's so tender and it just melts in your mouth. It's an amazing sandwich. And they stuff the sandwich, too. You don't get gypped. You get a lot of food for what you pay for.
Hashtag food porn going on the podcast right now. Now I'm going to have to stop and get food on the way home from the arena tonight. Thank you very much. No, but hats off to them for their efforts in the community. Definitely like seeing people supporting our troops. That's always great to see. So hats off to them for that. But to get back onto the regular hockey talk here on the Ziggy and Zarley podcast, I would like to head out west to our friends in Vancouver. Ryan Kessler reported to return tonight. I assume he did. I don't know, but hopefully. We'll look that up right now. Maybe we should play the Jeopardy theme song here.
Well, you know, with Ryan Kessler, he was signed to an offer sheet.
That's very true.
That's a great segue. Ryan Kessler was signed to an offer sheet by the Philadelphia Flyers. Nobody really knew who he was. He was a guy who had a great career with the Ohio State Buckeyes, one of the few good Ohio State Buckeyes that was out there, and actually turned out to be a good player. A lot of people were scratching their heads wondering what the Flyers were doing when they signed Ryan Kessler to an offer sheet. It's like, who's this? But they kind of they made the Canucks think that the Canucks actually matched that offer sheet. Hey, it turned out this Ryan Kessler's not too bad, and I wish more teams would have the fortitude to go after a guy and sign him to an offer sheet. We're talking to you, Toronto. We're talking to you, New York Islanders. Go after Ryan O'Reilly. Make things a little bit interesting. You know what? Go around Greg Sherman, who doesn't know a good thing when he sees it, when he has a second-line center, a legitimate second-line center on his team, and doesn't want to pay him the money that he's earned. And Ryan Kessler is in the lineup tonight. He got an assist on a Chris Higgins goal. That's a big, big boost to the Canucks, who have managed to play well without him. So it's good to see Ryan Kessler back, one of my favorite players in the NHL.
Great American hockey player, Olympic stud as well, Ryan Kessler. Always glad to see him back on the score sheet. Glad to see a second line returning to the Vancouver Canucks. I know we discussed that at length on the original version of this podcast. But yeah, I mean, let's do this, people. Let's get some offer sheets out there. I don't know why it's been decided by the GMs. And I think with Brian Burke actually being out of the chair in Toronto, it may actually open the door for more offer sheets to occur, because I know Brian Burke absolutely wanted Kevin Lowe blacklisted from trading with pretty much any GM after the Dustin Penner offer sheet that he forced Brian Burke to let Dustin Penner go and accept the picks. And then also, I believe Kevin Lowe also offer sheeted Thomas Vanek for the Buffalo Sabres. And the Buffalo Sabres were forced to put up more money than they wanted to spend. And this was before the big money, big papa Terry Pagula days where they had all the cash in the world. Mr. standing next to Gary Bettman saying, if I wanted to make money, I wouldn't have bought a hockey team. I would open up another oil rig. Like, oh, boy. Gary Bettman had to love that comment. But No, so I mean the offer sheets are an interesting tactic. I think, the Flyers, who not my favorite team as a Penguins fan, but that was a big move signing, offering Shea Weber that huge deal that forced Nashville to sign. Thank God they did, because I didn't want to watch Shea Weber play for the Philadelphia Flyers 6 times a year in a regulation season. So bring back the offer sheet. Long live the offer sheet.
Yes, long live the offer sheet. I remember when the Rangers tried to offer sheet Joe Sakic. You know what? That maybe it'll go full circle. Maybe the Rangers will offer sheet Ryan O'Reilly from the Avalanche. Why not? But
Hey, Brad Richards.
I actually doubt it'll happen, though, because the Rangers aren't too short on center, so we probably won't see that. But who knows? Maybe they'll decide to match it. You never know. They matched Joe Sakic. Grant is a much different player than Ryan O'Reilly. Ryan O'Reilly, still very early in his career. Joe Sakic, we knew was going to be a Hall of Fame player when he was offer sheeted. And they ended up keeping him because he was certainly worth that money. I mean, who knows? Maybe it might force the Avalanche to make a move and be like, you know what? We got to keep this guy because let's say a team like the Red Wings offer sheet him. Do you really want him playing for your rival? I don't think so. I think you're going to try and do everything in your power to make sure he doesn't play for your rival. That would almost be like the Bruins offer sheet and PK Subban, even though they wouldn't need him. But you never want to see a player that's going to hurt you in the future on your rival team.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I would love to see Boston. I'd love to see them offer sheet PK Subban. Reunite the Subans. Bring them all into one house, too. That seems to be the trend in the NHL right now.
They do have Malcolm.
I got Malcolm in the draft this past year in Pittsburgh, so much to the chagrin of New Jersey Devils fans who believed that he was going to be there at that late first-round pick that they had. Almost seemed directly related to the fact that Boston did not want Subban going to the Devils because the Devils didn't elect to forfeit that pick for reasons unknown to anyone other than Lou Lamoriello, I assume.
With the way they're going, they're going to have a late first-round pick anyway, so it's almost as if Lou knew something. But they got a guy with that pick that's done very well for him, and Stephane Matteau. So it looked like they knew what they were doing there. But you know what? I'd like to see with Jordan Subban, who could be a first-round pick for them this year, or at least will definitely get drafted. I want to see Toronto get him. Put all the Subans, and they're all rivals of each other. Toronto, Boston, Montreal, they're all rivals of each other. Hopefully we'll see the third Subban brother go to Toronto.
So as a New York Rangers fan, how worried are you about the mystical pull the Stahl brothers have? Do you think they're going to somehow wedge Mark out of New York to come join them in the sunny Carolina days?
Hey, if the price is right, so be it. The Rangers have a lot of good defensemen. They've got some defensemen in the pipeline, so if they get Mark Stahl and if they get somebody good in return for Mark Stahl, I say let it happen.
Wow.
I mean, he was almost let go a few years ago. They almost considered trading him because they had a good amount of defensemen.
Yeah, like Wade Redden. Whoops.
But the Blues think he's good.
Hey, I was just going to say that. Glad to see Wade Redden getting a shot out in St. Louis with the Blues. Actually, hasn't looked bad. I mean, he's still a serviceable NHL defenseman, just not at the cap hit that he was offered by the Rangers. And very interesting to see how they kind of immediately push through like a preliminary amnesty buyout just for like Scott Gomez and for Wade Redden. But good for them. I mean, they were two players that were taking a lot of heat for their teams. Not really their fault. If somebody, I mean, look at the Bobby Holik contract they offered from the Rangers. $10 million a year for Bobby Holik. I love Bobby Holik. He's hilarious as a broadcaster and a commentator. Love him on the Merritt versus Wyshynski podcast. He jumps in, has his own podcast, Holik on Hockey.
And actually was at Erie Insurance Arena on Wednesday night.
And was here in Erie on Wednesday night.
Yes, he knew while he was teammates with Peter Sidorkovich, the assistant coach on the Hartford Whalers for a couple of years, and then ended up crossing paths again with the New Jersey Devils, where Bobby Holik was mostly known as a very good grinding checking line center. But the Rangers, oh man, that was a bad contract. $10 million for a checking line center. I mean, he could put the puck in every once in a while, but you want to pay $10 million for Jordan Stahl?
No.
No.
And Jordan Stahl has much more offensive upside, I believe, than Bobby Holik. I mean, Jordan Stahl has a 29-goal season under his belt. Those are pretty lofty numbers for a Bobby Holik to hit.
All right, you want to pay $10 million? Oh, no, I was going to compare him to Chris Gratton, but no, Chris Gratton was bad. I'm trying to think of other big third-line centers that – all right, Keith Primo.
Oh, Keith Primo, $10 mil?
Yeah, you
No.
wouldn't pay $10 million
No.
for Keith Primo.
I can't do it. I can't, good conscience, ever say that that's a good
I
idea.
want to pay $1 million for Wayne Primo.
Oh, poor Wayne Primo. But no, I mean, I can't blame the players in those instances. I mean, you're Bobby Holig and somebody says, hey, we want to give you $10 million a year to play hockey for the New York Rangers. I mean, how you don't go, and how many times do I have to sign my name? Is there like more than one cop? I mean, I'm rushing to put that check in the bank. I mean, you can't blame the players. The money's offered to them. It's not like, it's not like they came with an initial offer and said, Bobby, we want to pay you $7 million a year. And he went 15, and they went 10, and he said, okay. I mean, this is an outlandish contract. Good for Bobby, good for Bobby's agent for getting their payday there. But really just goes to show you why we have had 2 lockouts in the past 8 years when contracts like that, without a salary cap, without any kind of limitations to what the big market teams could spend, you get a lot of contracts like those, and now that's not going to happen anymore. Now these contracts, if you try to bury them in the minors, they still count. So anybody, I believe, over $1 million in your minor league system is still counting against your NHL cap. So
Yep.
So long to the days of hiding Cristobal Huet over in Switzerland, and Wade Redden in Hartford, and trying
Rick
to put
DiPietro on the IR.
Oh, well, Rick DiPietro lives on the IR. It's actually a rare visit when he makes it to the rink to play hockey games. And it's been so rare. I don't think he's cut his hair or shaved since the last time he wasn't hurt. And he has quite the wild man look going for the Islanders netminder.
Yes, and at least we don't see those long, ridiculous contracts anymore that are circumventing the cap. So they were able to sort out a lot of good things with this last CBA agreement. And it's just funny how we reminisce about all those things, all the bad contracts. My favorite story about the Scott Gomez thing, when he was with the Montreal Canadiens, is that there was a bar in Montreal that offered free shots to everyone whenever Scott Gomez scored a goal. And it didn't happen for like 6 months. When he scored a goal, my favorite was the website too.
Oh, no. The best part of that story is it was over a year, 1 calendar year between goals for Scott Gomez. And he scored, I believe, 2 to 3 days after the calendar year. And they didn't give shots to anybody and said that the contest only ran for a year. So they actually backed out of free shots for a miraculous occurrence, which that's just bad business up there. I mean, I'm
not going to that bar if I go to Montreal.
Never going there. But, yeah, to your point.
Or, maybe I'm going to that bar and speaking English just to see what happens.
Just to see how long it takes before you get jumped in the parking lot.
Oh, yeah. No, they won't serve Randy Cunnyworth, so they won't serve me.
They certainly will not. And, yeah, to your point, maybe one of the greatest websites in all of hockey history, did Scott Gomez score? And the answer, almost always, was no.
No. With the period.
With the period. Not an exclamation point, because we're no longer excited about it. We're expecting this at this point. But all good-natured ribbing to Scott Gomez aside. Very glad to see him out there with the San Jose Sharks, signing a contract and hopefully getting a chance to be an effective player again in the NHL.
Yeah, with Scott Gomez, he was a very likable guy when he was on the New York Rangers. It's just that he never really justified his big contract. I think he seemed to be a player that was benefiting from the system in New Jersey. He's just never been quite the same player since he left the Devils. So there's an example of a player who leaves the confines of the New Jersey system and just has not been successful since then. He didn't justify his big contract with the Rangers, especially didn't when he went over to the Montreal Canadiens, and what was an awful, awful deal for the Habs. And now that he's got a new chance with San Jose, hopefully he'll be able to make amends there, continue to play well, or try to play well, and try and get that Stanley Cup ring that he's trying to get back again.
Yeah, I mean, and here's hoping for success for the San Jose Sharks. We do like to see them succeed because they're a fun team to watch when they are going well. Not going so well lately, unfortunately, but hopefully they do get back to those ways. And I actually wanted to introduce a new segment here. Well, I guess they're all new segments until you do them the first time, but I would call it my unpopular thought of the week. And as we're talking about amnesty buyout contracts, the buyout of Scott Gomez, of Wade Redden, a lot of discussion about who each team would use their amnesty buyout contract on.
Ooh.
And originally, a lot of people in the Penguins fan base were thinking Paul Martin was going to be a target for that amnesty buyout. But Paul Martin, whatever happened during the lockout, I don't know if, he took a visit with Lance Armstrong. I don't know what's going on with Paul Martin, but he came back completely focused, lasered in, very, very good defensively, except for the other night when he ended up taking 3 penalties, his second, third, and fourth penalties of the year. Managed to play the entire season, only taking 1, and took 3 in one game the other night. But that's not my target for my unpopular thought of the week. Unpopular thought of the week, the Washington Capitals should amnesty buyout Alexander Ovechkin.
And I don't think you're too far off on that. You know what? It could be a possibility that could even happen. With Ovechkin, he just has not been the same player over the first part of the season. He started to get some points here and there lately, but he's not worth the money that they've been paying him. And I think, based on, you look at a guy like Mike Ribeiro, who's making significantly less money, is in the top 10 in scoring. Mike Ribeiro, that was a great trade. I believe it was for Cody Eakin and a second-round pick or whatever. Man, when that trade was announced at the NHL draft, I was wondering what Dallas was doing. I thought Dallas had a horrendous offseason, and that trade just was part of it. Mike Ribeiro has just done wonders with that team. And some of the other guys have outscored him on that team, like Troy Brouwer, for example, has done very well. I think Joel Ward has more goals than Alex Ovechkin. Ovechkin, for some reason or another, has just not been the same player than when the Caps signed him. And he's got that long contract, too. You know what? I could see a similar situation like the Yankees did with A-Rod, where they restructured his long contract. I think they could amnesty buyout Ovechkin and be like, hey, listen, it's going to be tough to say, because is he going to want to sign with them again? It depends on who wants who more. Is Ovechkin going to want to stay with the Capitals and just care about the money, or is he going to try and do the good thing and say, okay, I'll accept the amnesty buyout, but we're going to have to open up some cap space and bring him some more players so we can contend for a Stanley Cup? He's got to be a team player, and I don't see him doing that. So I think if he does get the amnesty buyout, which could conceivably happen because I don't think he's justifying his contract, he will no longer be a Washington Capital, because he doesn't strike me as a guy that's going to share the wealth on that team.
No, and, when you look at his numbers over the last few years, they're just not good. I mean, for that contract, 13 years, I believe over $130 million. There's some years he's getting paid $12, $13 million a season. And that's four players right now. I mean, you could sign players for $3.5, $4 million. You can sign Matt Duchene right now for $4 million. You could have 3 Matt Duchenes for 1 Alexander Ovechkin in terms of cap space right now. I know it doesn't work that way, and it's an exaggeration, but a hyperbolic statement, if you will. But at the same time, not playing well. Picked up recently, like you said, I think 3 points in his last 3 games, couple of goals and an assist. But, I mean, when the team's winning games, scoring 5-6 goals, and he has 1 point, that's not the Alexander Ovechkin I remember. That's not the Alexander Ovechkin coming down the wing there I feared with that great shot, because it seems like Alexander Ovechkin peaked too early with his style and his strategy and his skill level, and people have found ways to play around that. Yep. They've gotten sticks on puck. They've taken the body. They've not let him, shoot through their legs as a screen to beat the goaltender. And these were moves that worked for Alexander Ovechkin for a long time because people didn't know how to stop him or that he could be stopped. But I think a lot of it comes into that Montreal series where Montreal Canadiens, as the 8th seed, take out the Washington Capitals in a 7-game series and basically made Ovechkin ineffective. The defense there by Kirk Muller, who's now the head coach of the Carolina Hurricanes, completely wrote the book on how to stop Alexander Ovechkin. He even wrote the book on how to stop the Pittsburgh Penguins in the second round when Montreal walked right through them as well, and made me dislike Mike Camilleri more than I'd like to admit. But no, I mean, he wrote the book on how to shut these teams down, and the Penguins and the Capitals to this day are still suffering from that defensive system put into place by Kirk Muller. So I mean, you just look at it and you shake your head, but it doesn't sound like something that you would even think. Like, Ted Leonsis, this is his boy. This is his bread and butter. Rock the Red, the Caps, Alexander Ovechkin, and the rock and rolling Caps, baby. But it's not there anymore. That flash, that flair, that attitude, that swagger, that aggressive nature. it's gone. When was the last time you saw Alexander Ovechkin like just lay somebody out with a clean hit? Like just a
It's been a while.
big body check. That part, it's just not a part of his game anymore.
Yep.
When's the last time he was set up on that left point or on the left circle, face-off circle on the power play and just fired one into the back of the net and just kept doing it night after night after night? It's just not there anymore. I don't know if it's the player. I don't know if it's the defensive systems against said player. Maybe the league has evolved and he hasn't. I don't know. But right now, it may be unpopular for the Washington Capitals and their fan base, but the best move for the team may be that Alexander Ovechkin is no longer a Washington Capital.
Well, he's got the Roger Dorn syndrome. He's not laying out for that ground ball, and Alex Ovechkin is not gonna go for that hit. If I'm making all that money like he is, I wouldn't be doing anything either. I think he's just become complacent, and other players in that team have surpassed him.
Yeah, and it's sad to see because the core of that team that looked like it was poised to win perhaps multiple Stanley Cups. Alexander Semin, Alexander Ovechkin, Nicholas Backstrom, Mike Green, Semyon Varlamov. Most of those guys are not as good as they once were or aren't on the team anymore.
Yep.
Alexander Semin down in Carolina, Semyon Varlamov out in Colorado, Alexander Ovechkin, a shell of his former self. I mean,
Thomas Fleischman now tearing it up in Florida.
Yep, Flash. Gotta give a big shout out to Thomas Fleischman. I think I have like 87 of his rookie card that year. I love Flash. Hope he's the best player ever because I'd love to make some money on those cards someday. But no, I mean, you're just looking at these teams. You're just looking at these players on the Capitals team that was supposed to be so good for so long, and they have good complementary pieces. I mean, Eric Fair when he's healthy, great complementary piece. Jason Chimera, great speed, good complementary piece. Troy Brouwer, physical, net presence, good complementary piece. But right now, it's not the complementary pieces that are the problem. Joel Ward, great complementary piece. Carlson, Alsner, they have the talent, but it's the stars that aren't doing it for the Washington Capitals right now. And at the rate they're going, with the money they're paying out for Mike Green, for Ovechkin, for Nicholas Backstrom, when do you have to pull the trigger? When do you blow it up? When does George McPhee lose his job over this? Because it's gotten to the point where they've killed so many coaches out there in Washington that it's not the coach anymore. Now you have to start looking upstairs.
Yeah, and I think that this time could be done sooner rather than later, especially if they continue to struggle because, I mean, there's just some nights where they don't look good. They don't look like a team. And it's just a mess right now, and you hit it right on the head. It's because the stars aren't contributing. It's the lower-level guys that are contributing. Which I shouldn't say lower-level guys, but the role players. It's good to have your role players contribute, but it's not going to be anything if your stars aren't contributing. Unfortunately for the Capitals, that's not happening. And it's a shame because that team had a real chance to be in the Stanley Cup final, and now it seems like that they've just been set back for so many years because of the lack of play we've seen from Ovechkin, from Mike Green being hurt for years. I think that's set them back. And they don't really have a definitive goaltender net right now. Is it Holtby or Neuvirth? Who's their number one in the future? We don't know. There's a lot of question marks with that Capitals team. And you look at the other teams in their division. Granted, a very weak division, but the other teams are moving past them. You have the Florida Panthers who won the division last year. They've struggled to start the year, but they certainly have got a much brighter future, especially prospects-wise, compared to the Washington Capitals. So their time is going to come very shortly. The Capitals don't really have anybody in the pipeline right now to step up and take the lead in the future. The Tampa Bay Lightning, we touched on them earlier, look like a good team. The Carolina Hurricanes certainly have some great pieces to build around. We also touched on Winnipeg earlier. It seems like whereas all the other teams are starting to progress, the Washington Capitals are falling backward, and you cannot do that in your division.
No, and the thing is that speaking of like players coming up the pipeline and what the Capitals do have, I think falling back on George McPhee for the struggles that they've had there, one of the biggest problems they had was keeping all three of those goaltenders. You had Varlamov, you had Neuvirth, you had Holtby. You had no definitive number one. You didn't know which one of the three you liked best. You still don't. One of them's not even there. And you give up on a guy like Thomas Vokoun, who's a great number one goaltender still. I mean, he's playing number one goaltending style minutes for the Penguins this year. Has looked phenomenal. Hasn't looked rusty. Does not look like a backup. Looks like a guy that could come in and carry the Penguins team if Marc-Andre Fleury falters for any reason. So to give up on an established goaltender for three kids It makes no sense. It just doesn't make sense. You have to pick the one you think is going to be the one, and you trade the other two for pieces you need. There's never a point to having 3 great goaltending prospects.
Yep.
You pick one, you trade 2, and you make your team better. You get a solid backup like a Thomas Vokoun to pick the team up when Holtby or Neuver struggles, and you ride them. And you ride them when they're playing good, and you bench them when they're playing bad. And you now have 2 assets. Maybe you have a top 6 forward that you got for one of your goaltenders. Maybe you have that shutdown defenseman. Or maybe you have a better offensive defenseman or somebody less injury prone than Mike Green on that back end from that prospect. So just a weird situation going on in Washington. And at this point, it doesn't look like it's going to be long before the axe is finally going to fall on General Manager George McPhee.
Yep, which is a shame because he did a good job of building that team from what had been, they'd struggled for many years. They were a team that did not make the playoffs for quite a bit of time until Ovechkin was able to step in and help bring that team into prominence and bring the fans back in the building in Washington, D.C., and really get fans excited about hockey in the nation's capital. You know, they didn't have much to cheer about. The Redskins hadn't been doing very well. The Nationals had come in. They were basically an expansion team when they came into Washington, D.C. Nobody really watches the Wizards there. They're bad anyway. Well, the Capitals gave D.C. reason to cheer. I mean, they got those politicians that are all there making everybody upset. The Capitals are making everybody happy in D.C., and now they're making everybody sad. Especially Pat Sajak. That guy's a season ticket holder.
Poor Pat Sajak.
Poor Pat Sajak has to fly from L.A. to watch that performance.
Pat Sajak,
he deserves
better.
He deserves better because right now the Capitals don't have any money to buy Vals because of how hamstrung that contract for Alex Ovechkin has put him in the cap.
That's not true, sir. The only Vals that they can buy are AO. Boom.
Boom.
But Pat Sajak, if you do listen, we're sorry, man. We're sorry. Don't do it to yourself. Just get center ice. You don't have to go. You can watch it on your TV at home. You can DVR it. You can just, you can have a beer on your couch.
You can get King season tickets.
You could get King season tickets, and let me tell you, team with some struggles this year, but always has the potential to be an exciting team and make a decent run with the talent that they have. So I think we're probably going on a little long here, so we're probably going to have to wrap this up. But I think the main point we want to make on the podcast today is Pat Sajak, don't do it to yourself. It's not worth it, man. Get help.
Get help. Get help. Alex Trebek will tell you to do that, too.
Hey, Alex Trebek recently coming off one of the best Jeopardy scenarios ever on the teen tournament.
Yes. Oh, I was rooting for that kid. That kid in the middle was such a snob. He was. Like, I never want to root against a 16 or 17-year-old, but this kid was a snob.
You're going down.
And then he had the kid on the left who was like the Connor McDavid of the teen tournament because he was so much younger than everyone. I think they said he was 13. There's no way. That kid was 9. That kid was 9. He was in 3rd grade. He was just getting homeschooled as a high schooler. He was like the Doogie Howser of the teen tournament. The kid on the right was just understated and had that. He was just. I just liked how he carried himself compared to the kid in the middle. The kid in the middle was just so stuck up, and I think Alex Trebek wanted to smack him. So I was so glad that Leonard Cooper from Little Rock, Arkansas, won with the greatest Final Jeopardy response since Cliff Clavin on Cheers, who are 3 people that have never been in my kitchen. But he. I just loved. Who was some guy on Normandy? I just won $75,000. That was classic. I was, the kid who was just quiet the whole game. Unknowingly bid $18,000 on the Daily Double and got an easy question and won it. And then, in the first bit of confidence, cocky confidence, if you will, has that response. I was really happy for him. I mean, that's the first time I jumped out of my seat and cheered watching Jeopardy. Wow. And I've watched Jeopardy for over 20 years.
Wow.
That was great to see. Great moment in Jeopardy history. And Alex Trebek said it best with a laugh. I love these kids and their sense of humor in the teen tournament.
Wow. We've also found out on the podcast today that Paul Roper marks out for Jeopardy winners. I was also going to mention in that teen tournament, they actually did the song lyrics for Call Me Maybe as the category titles. Hey, I just met you. This is crazy for 200. So here's my number. call me, maybe. And then at the very end, yes, we actually did that. So big shout out to Jeopardy for being topical in their humor, and especially to the eventual winner for.
And to Alex Trebek's doctors for getting him back on his feet after the heart attack last year.
Absolutely. But bring back the stash. Bring back the stash, Trebek. We want it back. I want it back.
I miss it too. I mean,
it's a part of my childhood I want back.
I couldn't believe when he got rid of that mustache. You know, it was kind of like with when Bob Barker turned into white-haired Bob Barker in the mid-'80s on Price is Right. You're going to get us started on another tangent with game shows. I can go on that. I could create a podcast just about game shows.
Well,
I don't know what I call
stay
it.
tuned, everyone, for the second hour and a half of this podcast, which will be all about game shows.
Survey says.
Survey says everyone stops listening.
Richard
here.
Dawson is the best Family Feud host of all time.
Louis Anderson says he will eat you for that response. No, we gotta go. Thank you to anybody who survived listening to the podcast this time. A rare time when Paul and I are in the same building, and what a lovely empty Erie Insurance Arena it is right now. But we will sign off with you until next time. Thank you so much for listening. I am Jim Merritt. You can find me on Twitter at thekid8711. Of course, you can find Paul Roper at Paul_Roper, and make sure to tweet us your comments, your concerns, your questions, your queries, any other word that I can think of out of a thesaurus. And if you just want to hit us up and tell us that we're wrong or we're idiots, that's fine too.
Yes,
Paul?
Enjoy the hockey this weekend.
Enjoy the hockey.
And throughout the rest of February.
And